Hi everyone, and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. It's Karen here again to take you through a tutorial for you brand new beginner crocheters. If you're on this video, it's because you are really excited about getting into the crochet craft and you're probably curious as to how to get started. Now in today's tutorial, I'm going to take you through how to do a chain stitch. And if you're here, I am assuming that you've already seen the video on how to create the slip knot to place on your hook. If you haven't seen that video yet, there is a link in the description box down below. Make sure to click on that and watch that first. Or you can click this little card up here, right there, and it'll take you to that tutorial. Now, anytime we start a crochet project, obviously it's important to always have some yarn on hand, a pair of scissors, and a yarn needle. And remember that a yarn needle is a lot larger and it's much different than a thread needle. So make sure that you have the right tool for your project. Now, let's get started on our very first stitch, which is going to be the chain stitch. Now, we're going to begin with the chain stitch, which is usually one of the first things that you will work up when you're creating a project. And this is where it can be a little funny because you've got a short tail here, you've got a long tail here, you've got your hook. It can be really, really funny. Now, I do have a video all about how to hold your hook. And there's two different ways to hold it. One is the knife position and one is the pencil position. And I talk about this a little bit more in depth in that video. Of course, there will be a link to that in the description box down below. I tend to hold mine in the knife position. I do sometimes vary back and forth if I'm getting a little tired, but pretty much in all of my tutorials, you're gonna see me holding it in the knife position. That's just what's comfortable for me. So what you wanna do is make sure that you find the position that's most comfortable for you, where you feel like you can handle the hook and your yarn at the same time, okay? Now what I always try and do is when I begin, I always have this little short tail in front or facing towards me. And my working yarn, which is the long end that tends to be attached to your skein or your ball, will be in my case, it's going to be in my left hand because it's my non-dominant hand. If you happen to be left-handed, you most likely would be holding the hook in your left hand and the long side or the long end would be in your right hand. So just something to keep in mind. So generally speaking, you're going to have your hook in your dominant hand. So for me, that's going to be my right hand. Okay. And now you are going to find whatever way is comfortable for you to hold your yarn. So the main thing I want to do is I want to have my yarn between my index finger and my middle finger. And this helps me to kind of control the tension a little bit. Now, initially, I used to just hold the rest of it with my other three fingers nice and curled. So now it creates a little bit of tension. And initially I would kind of hold on to the tail here because otherwise we don't really have much to hold on to. So you can see it creates a little bit of tension and then it helps me to work the hook either under or over, okay? Now in recent years, I've found that hooking my pinky and then bringing it through these two fingers really gave me a lot more control and it helped to relax these fingers. As I'm getting a little older, I found that I was really tightening with these three fingers and it was making my hand sore. So sometimes when you watch tutorials, you'll see people really wrap it around here and come all the way around, which I know can seem really, really daunting. So for now, super beginner, just think about pinching your yarn between your index finger and your middle finger. And then you will eventually figure out what's most comfortable for you to kind of control the tension or the gauge of your yarn, okay? So I'm just gonna do what's comfortable for me and I'm gonna hook my pinky, but most importantly, see how that yarn is between the index and the middle? That's where I wanna be. And right now you can see I'm holding my short tail here. Now some people will let it dangle, which is fine. It's not the end of the world, but you may find that cumbersome. Like, see, I feel like it gets in my way. So I tend to just bring it in close and snip it in next to my hook. So now I have a clear kind of working situation here. I can see where my hook is, and I can see where my yarn is. All right, finally, are you ready to do a chain stitch? Here we go. You'll take your yarn, and what you want to do is just loop it under or dip it under your yarn, okay? Now, this is called a yarn over, but notice I focused on the hook and not the yarn. So when we say yarn over, most people would do this with their non-dominant hand. They would use that to bring the yarn over. Very similar to knitting. So I know a lot of my new crochet friends are actual knitters, so this will seem a little bit more familiar to you. Now what I tend to do is I tend to actually just loop the hook under, which gives me the yarn going over. So technically I feel like it's the same thing. Ultimately, we want the working yarn to go over the hook and not under the hook. You see, that's going to make it a little bit trickier. See that? To bring it through our loop. So again, I make sure that loop is not very tight. Remember, we talked about that in the slip knot tutorial. So I'm going to dip my hook, and that's going to allow me, see that? I can hook the yarn. And now what I'm going to do is I want to pull this through this loop. Now, this is where it gets funny. So if you just try to pull like this, see, nothing happens. And this is the part where a lot of new crocheters get the most frustrated, because you look at a tutorial and you do all the right things, it makes total sense to you, and you're like, why is this not working for me? And that's because there's nothing on this end holding the loop taut for you to work it through. So remember how I said I hold on to this tail here? After I've yarned over, what I'll do is I'll transfer it to my other hand, and it looks like it's creating a little square here, okay? This is just momentarily because it's going to help me control the tension, and see, now the loop is staying in one place. So now when I pull the loop, I can pull it through that loop. Look at that. That is my first chain stitch. So I'm going to hang on to it here for a little while, just until I get enough length. So let's do a few more chain stitches. So I will yarn over, which just means I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to dip it under so that the working yarn is over the hook. See how the hook naturally wants to pick up that yarn? Nice and easy. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just guide it through, and notice how I'm just kind of making sure there's enough room there, and then I pass it through, and that's another chain stitch. Now, if you let this loop get really, really tight, so let's say I accidentally put it tight. When I yarn over and go through, see, it's very challenging to get that loop through. Now, sometimes in the beginning for brand new crocheters, it's very natural that this happens accidentally. And some people just are naturally tight stitchers. What I would really recommend is try your best to work on keeping your tension somewhat in the middle. You don't want it to be too loose, because then the integrity of your work is not going to really be that great. But try your best not to be so tight. So if you can see how I can see just a teeny little bit of space there? That for me is a good amount of tension. Now notice I've got a couple of chains now on my hook. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll start kind of holding the chain instead of this loop here, just so I can have more control. So again, I'm going to yarn over, hook that yarn, and see how I can create a little bit of space? Gently bring it through. Again, yarn over, hook, bring it through. One more time, yarn over, hook, bring it through. Look at how I'm holding everything. So this is the part that sometimes new crocheters miss. They're busy looking over here where the action is, which of course makes sense, right? But you sometimes miss the fact that the reason why it works is because I'm holding the bottom with my thumb and my middle finger. If I wasn't holding it and I did all the things I said I was going to do, see, nothing's going to happen. It's really, really tricky. See, it just starts moving on its own. So it's very important to secure the bottom of your work, especially in the beginning of a project. This is the part where if you don't get this down, it really won't work very great. Okay, so this is our basic chain stitch. So it looks like this in the front. So you'll see these little V's. And then if you turn over your chain on the back, you'll see these little bumps. And sometimes you'll hear crocheters talk about working into these bumps. So that's what they look like. So this is the back of the chain, and this is the front of the chain. And look at that. So what I would recommend is, now that you know how to do a slip knot and a chain stitch, I would practice doing your chain for quite a while. So you're probably going to do chains and like hundreds of chains, but this is great practice, okay? And the whole point is you want to get really comfortable working your hook and working with the yarn and how you're going to position it. So see, I'm kind of a little bit loose right now. Now, if you chain really loose, like look at what I'm doing, for example, here. See how wonky that is? Your project will not have as much of the same kind of structure as if you have a chain that's just sitting a little bit more snugly. Remember, we don't want to be tight. We just want to be snug, but yet relaxed. All right, guys, that's it for me today. I hope you found this beginner tutorial helpful and clear. And if you think it'll be useful to any of your friends who might be curious about starting the craft of crochet, please do feel free to share this video with them. My goal is to really just try and make sure that people feel that this is a very approachable and a doable craft. And it really, really is easy. Just remember, you need to take your time and go nice and slow. And of course, the great thing about these videos is you can press pause, go backward and forward if you need to. Now, if there's anything that you need a little bit extra clarification on, please do feel free to leave me a comment in the comment box down below. And as well, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please do give me a thumbs up. That really helps me know that I am on the right track with creating nice and easy basic tutorials for you beginner crocheters. And if you prefer, you can always email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And if you are new here, I invite you to press that subscribe button and come and join me every Wednesday morning when I upload a brand new tutorial with lots of fun new crochet projects. That's it for me today. And if you're looking to learn more basics of the crochet craft, make sure to watch this tutorial next. In the meantime, have an amazing day, happy crocheting, and I'll see you in the next session. Bye-bye.